Hi everyone, this is 1Q. Welcome back to my channel. Before we go into today's video, don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notification bell so you don't miss my video. Today I have a very special guest on my YouTube channel, Jared Rich. He is my personal growth coach that I met here in the United States. He helps me a lot with understanding Asian culture in the context of American culture and helps me with self-actualization and achieving my dream and goals in the United States. Today we're going to talk about Stop Asian Hate movement and discuss challenges, limitations for Chinese international students coming to the United States. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. Jared, thank you so much for being on my channel today. I'm really honored. First, would you mind introducing yourself a little bit?
Sure. So I am a growth coach for Chinese elites in the US. I do coaching that involves my background in psychology and sociology, as well as studying Chinese, which is more than, of course, just the language. I also study like the history and the poetry, and I coach people to help them achieve self-actualization. I want them to become their best selves and to realize their success and happiness in life in the United States. I use psychoeducation, also strengths-based coaching and empirical evidence in my coaching. I make sure that it's all peer-reviewed empirical evidence that I'm basing my things on.
Sounds good. And before we get started and dive deeper into the questions, I want to quote your finding in your first free strategy session video. Based on the research and statistics conducted by Ascend, a nonprofit organization, Asian American glass ceiling is almost 4 times more than the ones for women. For Asian women, however, there's a double penalty. White male is still 42% more likely than white female to become executive leaders in Silicon Valley tech companies, but 260% more likely than Asian women. And that stats struck me really hard. And I genuinely hope that through my effort, along with many passionate allies, we can increase the 260% in the very near future. And so, Jared, could you elaborate more on the stats and the definition about glass ceiling and bamboo ceiling that you mentioned both in the strategy video?
Sure. So let's start with addressing the terms. First, historically, sociologists and feminist scholars have often used the term glass ceiling. Anytime we're talking about women's advancement kind of related issues, we're typically using the word glass. Glass escalator is a term that we use to define like the way that maybe like white men can advance quicker in different positions. That's one. The other one is, we might say, there's glass walls that sort of like prevents women from making horizontal moves as easy, but also glass ceiling is the cutoff for like the executive level for women. This is the common way that it's used. And then researchers have noted in more recent years that there's a discrepancy between professionals and executives when it comes to the Asian identity, right? So Asian workers, they might be, for example, twice as educated as other white people who are promoted to executive level positions. And this is a problem. Bucky is kind of responsible for that research that I cited about executive parity index. And he's talked about that quite a bit, but since he kind of made it surface more as an executive, people began to realize that there was a problem there. So we did a lot of more research, and they've labeled it bamboo ceiling to refer to Asians and not just women. So glass ceiling historically refers to women. This can refer to Asian women, of course, but doesn't necessarily refer to any term for Asian men unless you're saying bamboo ceiling. So at the highest point, they found that it was most common for white men to become executives. Second most common was white women. We do talk a lot about the glass ceiling on that, and that's a real thing. So there's a huge problem there. But the third group is Asian men, and then after that, Asian women. So it seems that the difference, discrepancy between white and Asian in terms of the executive parity index is actually more significant than gender, perhaps. And we need like another term. But I realized that bamboo, often that term, while it might work for like researchers just to talk about it, I think can be kind of problematic sometimes for Asians. When they hear it, they'd rather not say that. So end up saying glass ceiling, glass ceiling.
And yeah, we just talked about it, but I came up with a term myself called
That's a
jade
great one.
ceiling that refers to both Asian women's ceiling specifically, because jade itself has the character of green in the bamboo, and it's also oriental. And it also has the character of glass because it's like crystal and clear, and it has the crisp of the glass. And so, yeah, let's start using that term.
Okay,
Let's hope.
that sounds good to me. I think it's great. Definitely couldn't have come up with that. I don't think the researchers who do this are that creative, that level, or know enough to say that. Come up with a term like jade ceiling. But I think that's a great way to resolve that problem.
So let's go to my next question. As we all know, Stop Asian Hate is a recent movement in response to racism against Asian Americans related to the COVID-19 pandemic. What do you think is the significance of this movement, and what impact does it have on the current system of the American society?
Oh man, there's so many things there. I could talk about it for 12 hours probably, but if I think the first thing for me, since we're already talking about terms and terminology, I don't particularly like the name. Just I would change it to Stop Anti-Asian Hate. Just to be very clear about it. But the main point there is this can be kind of a cognitive error, I guess, there's of labeling something this way. Viruses don't come from an ethnicity, and they certainly don't come from a race, right? That's not how it works. Besides that being fundamentally wrong, and we're like carrying it over to a completely different group at some level. We all have some responsibility for the spread. We had Stop the Spread. We were given guidelines for this, how to prevent it, and you can compare it in all ways like that, but it's not just to compare people. The main point on that issue, if we're talking about the stigma associated with it, is just that it's misplaced. You really look at how did we handle it. That's really what it comes down to. And a lot of people have experienced a lot of traumatic events. It's not a good time for race relations in the U.S. as well. I think a lot of that kind of is boiled over. That's been festering for a long time. But it seems like we're more willing to address it now. And, we just kind of take it for what it is. Like, this is a time, this is a great time. We can start to actually focus more on these issues that are facing Asian Americans and others, right? Immigrants, even from Asia. They may not identify as Asian American, just Asians, right? This can also be a time to surface, to speak up, start talking about these things. Like, if you're waiting for permission, this is your permission, right? This is your hashtag. Your movement has come. So yeah, don't be shy, I'll say, right? Very common American saying. I think culturally different maybe, but try it out. Just maybe speak up a little bit about things that are bothering you, get into conversations. And
Yeah, and addressing the microaggressions that sometimes we
yes.
face. Yeah, we talked about that, and that's really great point. Moving on to the next question. I always tell people that I've only been Asian for 3 years because I came to the United States in 2018. So there's a difference, obviously, between Chinese Americans or Asian Americans and Asian or Chinese. So there are unique challenges and limitations just for us, like Chinese students and professionals or first generation immigrants compared to the Chinese Americans. So, what do you think are these limitations from your perspective? And next we can go with how do we address those? But let's talk about the
Okay.
challenges first.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one piece at a time.
Yep.
Yeah, so you mentioned one just there, microaggressions. And we can put these together. So one thing is you can sum it up in one word: socialization. Okay. You have these different experiences. If you were born and raised in the United States, your socialization is into the culture of America or the United States or whatever area that you live in. You assimilate to that kind of culture, I guess, or acculturate. You socialize into it. And if you're coming from a different culture, any country in the world, really, anywhere in Asia, say you come from China, your socialization occurred in China primarily, whatever area of China you were from. That was the culture that you grew up and became familiar with. And you came to the US, it's a new culture. There are things that are the same, yeah, but there's differences. And like you were saying, Wancho, you've only been Asian for so long since you came to the US, right? Never occurred to you. So that's one major difference. On one hand, for a lot of Chinese Americans, this idea of Asian is forever foreign, or some have been here for generations, and they still feel like people label them as an outsider. That if you are from another country, that might not bother you as much. So I just say, like, there's some kind of understanding that needs to be in place, not just between the two groups, immigrated from China and born in the U.S. with Chinese parents, or referring to themselves as Chinese American. Second generation. There's also 1.5 generation, but not between just that group, but everyone else as well. To recognize that difference, people have different cultures, right? Be open to their culture, learn about where they came from, that sort of thing. We don't have to ask them, right? A lot of the microaggressions for second generation have to do with those kind of questions that they get asked sometimes, or statements like, your English is so good. For them, it's like, what do you mean my English is so good? I was born here. Like, I'm American. But if you actually did learn English, that doesn't bother you. So that might be a point that you have, like, this disconnect on. So just more understanding needs to be in place, from both sides. Just empathize with the issues that they have on that side, and then also correct them. Don't be afraid to correct others in their microaggressions, right? There's always something you could say or do. Just be prepared to do it. Ask, what did you say? Did you really just say that? Those kinds of things. Be prepared. When you don't address a microaggression on the spot, sometimes it just gets forgotten, and you don't want that to build up over time into a more frustrating cascade of issues, right? So yeah, that's why I mentioned microaggressions quite a bit, just because I want you to be prepared if that ever does happen to you. If you're coming from China, you may not realize the historical trauma that comes along with the racism. You may not have experienced racism before, but it's not that place. Like, I guess you don't have, like, the place to speak for others, right? Where we haven't, like, discussed it with them, right? Kind of going out on a limb and saying that it doesn't exist because I never experienced is not fair, right? So yeah, I hope I answered the whole question there. I'm not sure.
I think, yeah, with the microaggressions, calling people out, it's harder to do it than talking about it, because the moment just passed. And also, like, with language barrier, for Chinese, I think that is a huge issue, that why we aren't able to call out things on the spot, because, like, first we're in shock, and then we have to translate, and then we have to come up with things and then translate back, and by that time, like, moments have passed. And also, there are just differences in communication of what's considered rude and what is considered, like, you don't want to be rude to other people, but at the same time, you want to be firm, and you want to, like, call people out. So it's a fine balance, I would say. Are there any other advice that you want to give for specifically for Chinese students and professions seeking education and career opportunity in the US?
Yeah, I guess I'd just say, in general, try to be positive. Try to always have, like, a positive attitude towards the culture that you're finding yourself in. Try to embrace it, and also, you know, you don't have to throw away your culture, right? Bring the positive parts of your culture, find out what people really appreciate about yours, and be open to sharing ideas, and just be patient with yourself, be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Right, you kind of have to grow. When you're uncomfortable, you can grow. Yeah, if you never get out of your comfort zone, then you're not ever growing.
And I know that during your coaching session, you talk a lot about the history of Chinese immigrations to the US. And me and Jerry, we just finished all three sessions of the
Yeah,
history, and it's a very heavy topic, right? It's a very
yeah,
heavy
it is.
topic for both of us. For me, I think it's very, very necessary to do so since I'm already here and I plan to be a part of this history. Why do you think it's important for us to learn about the immigration history for Chinese in the US?
Yeah, for one thing, it kind of makes you more aware of the culture of the U.S. and why it is what it is. I think when you come here from China, what I hear a lot from people is that they don't realize how many strange ideas we have about Chinese people, and like understanding where those came from and why they happen is kind of helpful. Just kind of like deconstructing all of that and understanding it, you'd be more prepared to address things as they come up, and it also just make for better relationships across the board, since you know you're stepping in a new world where you're part of Asian identity. You'll be able to understand that Asian American experience better. So it doesn't seem like, you know, that you're out of the loop, right? That you have some catching up to do, before you can have like a respectable opinion about it or something like that, right? Showing that you understand it is, I think, very valuable in that step, for whatever reason, and just achieving self-actualization because you understand how others view you, because of the way that your appearance, you know, is, or how they view you based on your appearance, and understanding the, you know, the frustrations of the past. It's useful. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it not only help you as an individual, but if you want to become a part of the movement, like if you just keep yelling stop Asian hate or anti-Asian hate, like that doesn't have its own strength. You have to have your points. You have to have like the talking points. You want to know where these frustration comes from. It's not just because a few people shot like a few Asians. It's because throughout the history we have been discriminated over and over by through laws, legislation, and culture and media, everything that combines. That's what resulted in what's happening right now through like Stop Asian Hate, COVID, you know, racism, all of that. And same, I would say the same as Black History Month, like all Juneteenth. Today is Juneteenth. I don't know when I'm gonna post this video, but if you want to learn, like you have to learn the history of. You can't just think of Juneteenth, oh, another day off of work. Like that's not the way to live. But understanding the history and why you know it became a federal holiday, like things like this are very important. Understand the meaning behind it, and with that, taking all of these and moving forward and build a future for you and your community and your group and for humanity. I think that is why I and you know Jared and I both want to know the history of our people. So
Mm.
I think that's what I want to add on. And last, I would love to give a few minutes to Jared to share how you specifically help and empower Chinese elites to achieve self-actualization in the United States. Here's your chance.
Okay. All right. So there's a lot of things that we cover, right? And I have multiple steps we go through. Like I mentioned before, you know, we use psychoeducation, so you learn a little bit about psychology. I also incorporate some sociology and philosophy, and we use historical examples that really allow you to think through and form your own opinions about this stuff. And of course, it's not all just about social life, right? And maybe like social justice issues and things like that. It's really about you, about your success, your happiness, what it is that will help you be fulfilled. One, psychoeducation. Two, strengths based. And one of the main things is that people who can rely on their strengths are happier. One of those things we explore what your strengths are on that personal level. And then I encourage you to focus on those through our sessions and in your life here in the US, and making that cultural adjustment. And you're going to practice mindfulness. So we also do some mindfulness coaching. In mindfulness, we're actually focusing on goals, your self-actualization. In what state, at what point in your life or whatever it is, what are the conditions under which you are at your best and your happiest, your most successful self, your self-actualized self. That's really what mindfulness will focus on. Those are the ways that you can really accelerate your progress to self-actualization.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for sharing. And if you're interested in his coaching, there will be a link down below. And you can contact Jared through LinkedIn as well. So yeah, this will be the end of our interview. Yay!
All right.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.